Okay, Rabbi Shmuley podcast. So happy to be with all of you. And we have such a special guest this evening, one of my dearest friends and someone who immeasurably enriches the lives of all New Yorkers and people from all around the world. Sir Clive Gillinson, who is both the executive director and the artistic director of Carnegie Hall, the world's most famous cultural institution. And Clive, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Rabbi Shmuley.
It's so good to be with you. Let me just tell you why we were a little bit delayed. You know, it's so interesting in the age of Corona that we all have to be our own, like producers and everything, because the people that I work with are all working remotely. I actually have like a hammer banging into my head, and I'm wondering why. And we were trying to figure that out before. So if I just turn this off, that might end it. Let me just see. Yeah, that was it. Okay. No.
It's definitely nothing to do with me.
No. You like me too much to do that to me. Anyway, Clive, thank you very much for joining us. And I am such an admirer of yours. And you have enriched my life through the music and performances of Carnegie Hall, as well as through our own personal relationship. Tell me the status of Carnegie Hall. How are you doing, and how is Carnegie Hall doing?
I'm assuming you mean right now in relation to coronavirus.
Of course, yes.
Well, we closed on March 13. We're closed through the summer now. I mean, obviously that was incredibly costly. I mean, we probably will have lost about $8 million in that period. But now we're into the most complicated set of circumstances I can ever remember in my entire life in terms of management. And that is, we're looking at the fall season, our whole next season, which went on sale at the end of January when everything was fine. And we've already sold half the seats and had quite a few months ago. And we're looking now at what's a scenario if we open on October 1st? What's a scenario if we open on January the 1st, April the 1st, or if we have to cancel the entire season? And there's a lot of factors that will decide that. I mean, we have what does the governor decide in terms of opening of performance venues? We've got the issue around social distancing. If you social distance in a hall of 2,800 seats, which is the size of Isaac Stern Auditorium, you probably can get 350 people in there, plus ushers, plus stagehands and performers and things. So in other words, it could be an impossible situation financially to open under those circumstances. But what social distancing will mean as the months go by, again, none of us knows, because this picture changes all the time. So you've got to be very flexible. You've got to be able to move all the time and respond to changes. And meanwhile, we're planning the next season and 2 more seasons beyond that. So we're looking at everything in the long term as well. We have to talk to artists all the time who are meant to be appearing through this season, since some of them won't be able to travel, some of them may not get visas. There may be all sorts of situations that mean we won't be cancelling things. Artists just simply won't be able to come. So there's all these different scenarios that we're having to map around. And at the same time, what we're doing is we're trying to say, how can we go on serving people with inspiring musical experiences when you can't do any live experiences? And so we've started something called Live with Carnegie Hall, where we work with some of the greatest artists in the world, all working from their homes. And we create programs which really are telling stories and their journeys with some of the greatest performers in the world. And it's talking about their lives. It's talking about the lives of others. Today, we did a tribute to the great Lynn Harrell, one of the great American cellists who died a few days ago. And we got cellists from all over the world participating and talking about him, paying tribute to him, and playing multiple cello pieces. So, the whole thing is about how can you remain live, responsive, do things that are meaningful, even when most of what was the core of your work has had to disappear.
Amidst the bleakness of what you're saying, how the coronavirus has impacted on the New York cultural scene in general and Carnegie Hall in particular, amidst that bleak outlook, I'm actually really happy, believe it or not, to hear you say this, because the vigor and the passion with which you're saying it, I know that you weren't feeling that well. You look amazing. You sound incredibly robust. You are such a fighter for your institution. All of us who are in the New York area are so proud of Carnegie Hall. It's an amazing, and New York is obviously a world-class city. It's the capital of many things in the world, capital of diplomacy at the UN, capital of financial markets, maybe the capital of fashion up there with Paris or Milan. But it really becomes the capital of music because of Carnegie Hall. And you are the reason behind it. So first of all, Clive, I'm so happy to see how you are fighting for Carnegie Hall and finding every avenue and every platform by which to promote the inspirational music and performances that come out of Carnegie Hall. I promoted Carnegie Hall Live across all of our platforms because it's accessible to everyone. It's forcing, the necessity is the mother of invention. It's forcing you and so many other heads of prominent cultural institutions to innovate. And the question becomes, are performances that are through Zoom or through Facebook or any other social media platform, are they as impactful? Of course, the numbers are so much bigger. I mean, you get to reach a truly a global audience, but is it the same? How are people reacting to Carnegie Hall Live?
Well, I mean, essentially people love it, and you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously the difference between live music in the greatest hall in the world and something you receive virtually, the two are never going to compete, but you have to then think very carefully about it. It's not just trying to reproduce the experience you'd have in the hall, because that wouldn't work. You have none of the engagement, you have none of the personal ambiance with the whole, you have none of the engagement. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. There was a phone went off.
No. Let me just say something. This is the beauty of at-home interviews. We all get to see everything happening in our lives. It's so much more human. The coronavirus has brought out our humanity. Pray continue, please, Sir Clive.
Right. Sorry. Firstly, just to say, the live experience and the virtual experience will never be the same. But if you try to repeat one in the other context, that doesn't work either. People's feelings about sharing a concert with other people, being there as part of a community, engaging with the moment, is incredibly exciting. It's a visceral experience. Now, you don't get that with the virtual. But the fact is, with the virtual Carnegie Hall, with these programs, for instance, we can bring together people. And Sophie Mutter was on the program. She was in Germany today, so she paid a tribute. John T. Williams, who wrote
the world's greatest violinist, correct?
She really is one of the very, very greatest violinists. And John T. Williams, who wrote all the Star Wars films, he paid a tribute from Los Angeles. So you're able to create something you could never create in the concert hall. So you can connect people in a completely different way, take them on journeys, tell wonderful stories. And in a sense, everybody can join in. So the cellists were literally joining us from all over the world in order to participate and pay tribute to Lynn. We could not have done that in the concert hall. So what you have to do is you have to look at the strengths of each of your environments. I mean, what can you do in a concert hall that provides the greatest experience? What can you do online that provides the greatest experience? And make sure you're responding to what the opportunities are of each area. But the other thing we're finding very interesting is how different things are online and how that's teaching us things that we're thinking now, how do we use that for the concert experience? Now, I'll just give you an example. The other day, Joshua Bell and his trio played a performance. They talked about various things in their life and so on. And then they played the slow movement of the Mendelssohn Trio, probably 10 minutes of music. Now, if you go to a concert, the context in which you hear that will be 2 hours of music. And the impact of that slow movement is totally different when that is the only piece you're hearing at that minute, and there's a context built around it, and and they talk about why it means so much to them, and performing it as part of a whole series of extraordinary pieces of music. So we're thinking, how do we provide more context and more storytelling in concerts that we're doing? So I think we will learn a huge amount in that way. As you said, I mean, in terms of invention, I think we've already transformed our digital presence in a way that may have taken 2 years instead of 2 months at any other time. But we're also looking to the future to transform it far, far further. so that what we're doing is then creating something that will be totally meaningful beyond the opening again after coronavirus, on the basis that however many people love and come to Carnegie Hall, probably 99% of the world's population will never be able to come to Carnegie Hall. I mean, most of them won't even come to America. So how can we create something that gives them an experience that's a Carnegie Hall experience, as much as you can do online, so that we're providing something really powerful and meaningful to people who can't come as well? And I mean, you mentioned earlier about Live with Carnegie Hall. It's free. All our education programs are free. We've been reaching now about 800,000 people a year with the education programs, most of whom are kids, and most of whom are kids who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunities. So we're transferring a lot of that online and creating opportunities in the same way online. But the good thing is, once we open again, we won't stop the online. We'll continue to grow the online so that we've got the two working beside each other, and that our capacity for serving people will be far, far greater.
Well, you were well on your way to making Carnegie Hall not just an internationally recognized brand, which it always was, but you were well on your way before the coronavirus towards making it a brand with international reach. You were sending student orchestras all over the world, and you were accompanying them at times. Obviously, I don't think people actually understood that Carnegie Hall, beyond just being a venue on 57th Street in New York City, had this broad international reach. But with Carnegie Hall Live, it's so much more. Let me just shift for a moment. I see your being able to comment, Clive, about the future of New York City as being more prescient than most. And I'll tell you why. But New York City is an island. It's not that big an island. It was famously bought for like $20, and but it's become the most expensive island in the world, not because it necessarily has the greatest beauty. I think Hawaii is arguably prettier, and not because it's the best situated. I wouldn't say that we have the greatest climate. New York City has become the world's most valuable real estate and arguably the world's most influential city because of its cultural offerings, because of commerce, all the banks, and because of its cultural offerings, Carnegie Hall and the Met and Broadway. And so the question that so many people are now asking is whether New York City is going to continue to be New York City when those cultural offerings are being postponed indefinitely. So Carnegie Hall is beginning to be a global platform. Through Carnegie Hall Live, you're able to reach a global audience. There's no charge, it's free of charge. Everyone can participate. But what does that say about the island of Manhattan, where people live in small apartments, paying exorbitant rents, and they do that because in their mind, they're spending most of their time outdoors. Even if when it's freezing cold in the winter, the lights are gorgeous and beautiful. You can walk down Fifth Avenue and it's stunning. During the summer, you have Central Park, but you can go to a play at night. You can go to a recital at Carnegie Hall. You can go to some of the incredible bars. Now there is none of that, with the exception of maybe Central Park and jogging or walking, etc. What is the future of New York City? And I ask you this specifically as a Londoner who was knighted by the Queen. You were the head of the London Symphony. You were brought to Carnegie Hall. You took it to new heights. I can personally attest to what an incredible professional you are, as well as what a special man you are, because we work with Carnegie Hall. We do our annual galas. The last event we did before the coronavirus was our annual gala at Carnegie Hall. What is your opinion about the future of New York City as all of these cultural offerings have to be put more online and are postponed as live events?
Well, look, everybody is going to be monumentally affected by this, no matter what. I mean, I think the thing that none of us know, nobody knows at the moment, is it going to be for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years? Nobody has the slightest idea. So what you've got to do in the interim, and I think this is where America, particularly New York, where creativity will be central to ensuring that people at least make the very, very most of this, but also come up with ideas, such as I was talking about earlier, where they will have a lasting and ongoing impact, even when we're back. So, but my view is everything you do, certainly everything we do, but I think everything every major business does, is you try and make yourself a magnet for talent. Because talent in the end is the reason you succeed and why you can do things at an extraordinary level. I mean, that's one of the reasons why New York has been so extraordinarily successful, because it is a magnet for talent, and all the different things interface and they all feed each other. So the fact that, you know, so many brilliant people live here is partly because there's great culture, you know, and there's great culture because those extraordinary people are here and want to help and support it. So all the different things are interdependent. And my view is, because there is such a passion for everybody, such a passion from everybody in the arts for the art that they're involved with. I mean, Carnegie Hall, however long this takes, will still be the greatest concert hall in the world. And we will still be the magnet for talent from all around the world once it's over as well. Now, obviously, we're all going to go through a ferociously difficult time. We don't know how difficult and for how long yet. But I don't have any doubt about each of the individual organizations, even if maybe a few actually don't get through this. I mean, and you know, that totally depends on how long and how destructive this is. But even if a few don't get through, there will always be others that spring up. So I don't, you know, the creativity, the energy, the passion around the arts in this city are phenomenal. And I mean, as you said, I worked in London for a long time before, and it's terrific there as well. But in London, interesting enough, because there's government support, in some ways, I don't find quite the same energy in general as there is here, because here we live on the edge of the cliff all the time. I remember in 2008-9, overnight, we had to cut our budget by over 20%. And we worked like crazy to do it because it was totally up to us as to whether we survived. My colleagues in London, they told me, the Arts Council of Great Britain, which is the government funding, they've just increased our funding to help us through this. Whereas with us, everything was going to disappear unless we saved it. So there's the fact of living with danger in that way. It also gives tremendous energy and tremendous ability, I think, to face challenges because you're not protected. So it's one of the strengths and one of the weaknesses of America is, a lot of people are not protected, but equally it's part of the driving force of why America is so extraordinary.
I'm really happy you said this because, Clive, I now have you on record as saying that now that you moved to the United States, you upgraded while remaining a subject of the Queen and a knight of the Queen. So you're not concerned. You're right. After the 2008 financial meltdown and Carnegie Hall, of course, so many of its patrons are obviously connected to Wall Street because it is New York City, and they were the ones who suffered the most. So philanthropy would have understandably declined considerably. But now you're very optimistic. You don't sound like you're concerned for New York City. Like so many people are talking about how New York, we're seeing, prices in the suburbs, housing going through the roof. The pandemic, look, after 2000 and after 9/11, a lot of people said, oh, these skyscrapers, they're always going to be terror targets. New York's doomed. And that didn't happen. And then they didn't say it after the financial meltdown of 2008, but now a lot of people are actually saying that this pandemic has exposed irreversible weaknesses in the kind of urban living that New York City represents and that Carnegie Hall relies on. But you don't sound concerned for New York City. It sounds like you are convinced that Carnegie Hall is going to make a comeback and the Met's going to make a comeback and New York's going to make a comeback and the whole cultural scene. It's just a matter of time. That this gives Carnegie Hall the opportunity in the meantime, in the interim, to expand its global footprint, but ultimately as a concert venue and as a city that benefits from that concert venue, it's all going to come back as strong as before or stronger.
Firstly, I certainly wasn't saying I'm not concerned. Of course I'm concerned. I mean, this is doing vast amounts of damage, not just to institutions, but to so many individual people's lives. And of course, there'll be huge changes. I mean, even if you talk to people today, there's a huge downward pressure, from what I understand, on commercial property rates. So in the city, it sounds as though commercial property will probably get much cheaper. And you're right, at the moment, everybody wants to move out into the suburbs. But the fact is, if you watch human behavior, it doesn't take long before people start, once things are normal, till they start forgetting what the last disaster was. But the other thing, because we're good friends, I mean, you also know that I am an eternal optimist, which can be a pain, or it can be valuable.
I I wish this conversation would go on for weeks because you're lifting me up already. I like to see the whole bright future, God willing, and you should be an optimist. We should all be optimists.
I think we have to be. I mean, if you're going to make the good things happen and make the right things happen, they only happen because you make them happen. They never happen of their own volition. And so that's why I think you have to be an optimist. You have to be a believer. You have to have the passion and the commitment that you'll walk through walls to make things happen. And then they do happen. And I mean, it's one of the things I always say to our team. I mean, when we're developing a new project, firstly, it's got to be so good that nobody can knock it down as an idea. You know, so we'll try and knock it down ourselves. We'll do everything we can to prove why it can't happen. You know, and if you can make sure that you've created something that nobody can pull down, then it's going to be much harder. People's energy then tends to be directed towards making it happen rather than finding the why nots. I always want people to ask how. I never want them to ask why not, but we have to ask why not in order to get it to the point where people will only ask how. So I think all of these things are very fundamental in terms of attitude. And it's part of the reason I came here. I mean, when I was in London, I was offered a lot of jobs around the world and several in America. This was the only one I would have left Britain for, Carnegie Hall. And, you know, and it is so special. And so does everybody at Carnegie Hall believe that. I mean, it is something that pervades the place, partly because it is so extraordinary, partly because people want to be there for all the right reasons. They want to be part of what Carnegie Hall stands for. And it's that belief and that energy that I think will ensure that when the time comes, we find all the right answers coming back, but that meanwhile, we're finding all the best possible answers going forward without live music until we can have live music in the hall again.
Well, the specialness of Carnegie Hall, which I share that sentiment, obviously. Our organization has done its annual gala, which brings together a constellation of celebrities and political figures and global leaders. But we've done it in some very famous New York venues, like the Plaza Hotel, one of the most famous hotels in the world, or Cipriani, or the Marriott Marquis, another New York landmark, because it's right there in Times Square. But there's no energy like Carnegie Hall. It's such all the people, your team, warm, incredible people, consummate professionals, and I couldn't agree more about the special, let alone the incredible performances that we participate in, especially something as unique as opening night. So that allows me to transition to the healing power of music. If Carnegie Hall is special, it's because first and foremost, it is a music venue. Now, Clive, you're a world-class musician. I'm not. You're a great connoisseur of music. I am more of a listener. But we all know that music has a capacity to uplift, to inspire, to heal like no other medium. And interestingly, the confluence of these two things, of kind of the ability to inspire and music, for me happened one night in Carnegie Hall, although his reputation today is highly controversial. But when I brought Michael Jackson to speak at Carnegie Hall in 2001, and all of his fans descended from all over the world, and he wasn't singing, you know, he was actually speaking. And Carnegie Hall is just so beautiful. Use it for any kind of the event. In this case, it was an oration as opposed to a performance. But I was amazed at his capacity, because he was someone who brought music to the world, at like how attached his fans were to him. Now, I've seen other celebrities, you know, that our big galas at Carnegie Hall bring a lot of celebrities. We bring actors and actresses. We had a world famous boxing champion, Evander Holyfield, at Carnegie Hall with you just 8 weeks ago. But there's no attachment like music. There's something about music, and we see it there, you know, no matter who the great celebrities and public figures were of the past, say, half a century, you really don't get close to the Beatles or Elvis or Michael Jackson or even some of the legends like, I don't know, Janis Joplin. Little Richard died the other day, let alone some of the great classical musicians who play at Carnegie Hall. And now, through a global pandemic where people are filled with anxiety and there's a moribund feeling of hopelessness among so many. And just now, the United States hit this terrible, grim milestone of 92,000 dead. We're pushing 100,000, and these are mind-boggling numbers, Clive. What to you, as a lifelong musician and as someone who heads one of the world's great cultural institutions, which is all about music, What is it about music? Why does music uplift? Why does music soothe? Much more than, Netflix will allow us to escape some of the horrors of what we read about. Music, I'm sorry, movies can make us think, movies can have some depth, but by and large, television and a lot of the streaming mediums today, they're much more escapist. They don't have such incredible depth. They make us forget, and in that sense, we're becoming kind of Netflix addicts. Carnegie Hall provides a very different kind of remedy to this anxiety. What is it about the healing power of music?
Well, I think firstly, it's worth noting that there is no language barrier. I mean, music, it doesn't matter which country you live, which language you speak, it doesn't matter about any of those things. Music speaks to you as a human being. There's nothing in between you and the music. Whereas with language, there often is. But the other thing as well is, I think it's fundamental. Music is fundamental to who we are as human beings. And I've even read some anthropologists, who actually say music came before speech. If you just think of drums and so on. I mean, the most primitive music and little flutes made from a reed, the music came first. I mean, whether it did or it didn't, I think it's truly fundamental to who we are. The other thing, and I can't explain why, but to me, music seems to reach straight to your soul or to your heart. I mean, whatever the words are that are appropriate for everybody, is, everybody individually thinks of that a different way. But they're not, it doesn't necessarily go through the brain. You're not having to analyze or understand or think about it. It is just speaking directly to who you are as a human being. And I mean, the truly great composers, and that's of every genre. I mean, and that's what I love about Carnegie Hall as well. I mean, we're not just about classical music, it's world music, jazz, and so on, pop music. We're interested in the best of every sort of music, and different people like different sorts of music. But the fact is, I think it does connect directly, and it moves us and touches us because we don't have to think about it at all. It is speaking to us in terms of who we are as a human being. And that can be in many, many different ways. I mean, you talked about soothing, but it can be exciting, it can be inspiring. I mean, there's lots of, it can be totally savage and move us in that way. It's not just about one sort of mood, it's every sort of mood. And it speaks to us as human beings in a way where, if we need something that's wild and savage and exciting and brutal to listen to, and then another day or another time, we want something that is serenely, perfectly beautiful. It's all it's speaking to the different parts of every one of us as human beings. We all have huge sort of variety of moods, and music can speak to every one of them.
Clive, you've been very kind with your time. I want to reiterate my eternal gratitude to you for your friendship to me and the World Values Network. We so enjoy the work that we do with Carnegie Hall. I so enjoy attending the events at Carnegie Hall. I so miss those events, and I am comforted, to use that word again, at Carnegie Hall Live and everything that's being provided online. And we will continue to promote these incredible performances, which are vital to giving people a sense of hope and a sense of calm, or as you said at times, to disturb us in the right way, to give us that wake up. Let me just talk to you as a friend for a moment. How are you and Anya? I performed your wedding ceremony, and the whole family. How are you guys faring the coronavirus?
I mean, we're all fine now. We've all been through it, but every one of us is fine.
I didn't want to say that unless you guys have been through it.
It's life. It's real. I don't see any point in pretending or not pretending. So I mean, it's not pleasant.
So you guys had the virus, and
all of us in the family have had it. But as I say, I mean, the only thing that matters to me is we're all well now. We're all.
Let me just tell you, I'm so happy that we did this. I want to reiterate that because you look amazing. You sound great. You look great. And you're always so energetic, and you had this not that long ago. So thank God you came through strong, and I'm sure it is anxiety inducing but thank God you're well. And so you guys all got through it.
We all got through it. I mean, you know, it was slightly tiered. In fact, you know, the older we were, and you can obviously tell I'm the oldest, so, you know, it tended to be worse the older you got, which is, you know, what everybody says about it. But no, the reality is, you know, we're fine. And I never look backwards in life. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's gone, that's been and gone. I mean, you know, nobody knows whether the antibodies are there for a month, a year, 10 years, because nobody knows yet. But at least it means we all have the antibodies now, and we've been tested and we know we have. So, you know, in that sense, all we're doing is looking to the future and how do we, you know, I mean, there's that old phrase, which is very useful, which is, you know, never waste a crisis. So, of course, this is horrendous. And I mean, I think that the impact it's having on so many people's lives, particularly people who are less well off, is horrendous. And you know, so one's got to do, and we're trying to do all we can in that way through what we're able to do to help people and support people. But the fact is, we will all get through this. I mean, you know, humanity has faced terrible things before. And I think it's the human spirit that is the reason we all come out well in the end.
And God willing, New York will get through this. Maureen Dowd, I'm sorry, it wasn't Maureen Dowd. It was Peggy Noonan writing in the Wall Street Journal who said that the three biggest crises that the United States has faced over the past 2 decades all happened in New York. There was, of course, 9/11, and then there was the 2008 financial meltdown, and now this, when New York has been hit the hardest. And she said in that column in the Wall Street Journal that it's the price we pay, I want to quote her properly, for the privilege of living in the single most exciting tiny strip of land in the entire world. It is quite fascinating that this stuff always hits New York. And of course, we pray for everyone's recovery and for this horrible scourge to be purged from the earth. Clive, I'm so happy to see that you're well. The family had the coronavirus. You guys have all fared, thank God. You're healthy now, and you and Anya, the two children, are all well. And your passion for Carnegie Hall, your passion for music, and above all else, your passion for humanity comes through in every word and every syllable and every paragraph. And it's the reason why Carnegie Hall is such a success story. So how do people follow everything that Carnegie Hall is doing live now?
Well, it's all through our website. We're now beginning to add a lot of our education programs anyway have been made available online, and we're connected to so many people around the country, schools, colleges, individuals. So that's the 700,000 kids, 800,000 people altogether. And that is just growing and growing. But through Live with Carnegie Hall and through our website, one can get access to all the resources. One can get access to the projects we're doing, because now Live with Carnegie Hall, we started with that. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays. There's now a concert every Friday. We're about to launch education on Wednesdays. So bit by bit, we'll be delivering something to the public all over the world virtually every day of the week. So we're building that up, and there'll all be different strands.
All on the Carnegie Hall website.
Yeah, and it's all, I mean, I just wanted to go back for a second to something you mentioned earlier. You know, you were talking about you being the World Values Network. And I think one of the reasons why you and I are so close is because, to me, everything in the end comes down to values. And it's, you know, that is what underpins who we are and what we are. It underpins the fact that we see everything we do as service. We're not serving Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall is serving people in the best way we possibly can. It's why most of our education, almost all of our education programs are free, so that people, it doesn't matter whether you can afford it or not afford it, it's available to you. And in fact, we tend to focus much more on people who might not be able to afford it if it cost anything, and why and that's the reason they often don't have access to great music. So I think, you know, quite genuinely, values for me is what drives everything. And all our partnerships, we have a vast number of partnerships across the country and internationally. And the guiding light for me in all of that is you can only have partnerships with people who share your values. It just doesn't work otherwise.
Well, on that note, it's worth concluding, because you've been so generous with your time, with simply mentioning that your chairman of the board, Robert Smith, has been just an outstanding spokesperson of course, for Carnegie Hall, where he's chairman, but for the African-American community throughout so many interviews he's been doing, CNBC, Meet the Press on NBC, about how the coronavirus is disproportionately affecting people of lower income and minorities and the African-American community. And he is a very proud champion of those who are not as privileged and not as fortunate. I've been really impressed at everything that he's been saying and doing, you know, as a world-renowned philanthropist who most people know through that incredible act of charity where at Morehouse College at last year's commencement, he got up and paid off everybody's student debt. But he is your chairman and he's been doing an amazing job at promoting those values. Clive, thank you for everything that Carnegie Hall does. I'm so happy to see you strong. I don't think I've ever seen you this robust and strong. So your passion actually comes through even on Zoom, and I miss you very much. Although you and I live just a few miles away from each other, but the coronavirus is created a bit of distance, but there is no such thing, because when there's love between two friends, it can transcend any kind of impediment. So I wish you every blessing, and to Anya and the children and everyone at Carnegie Hall, all the people we work with at Carnegie Hall. God bless you, and thank you for bringing music and inspiration and uplift into our lives.
Well, and to you and your family as well. I mean, it's a real joy having met you and got to know you and become friends. You're an important part of our life.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you.
Thanks.